So this will remove all the constraints of our view. Another way of doing it, you have to select your view, come under the measurements, select each constraint, hit delete. So imagine if you have a lot of constraints under this view, it's just easier to go here and say just like clean constraints, and it will clean. What research suggested constraints are, for example, if I Control Z here to get my constraints back, let's say I move my view here and it thinks that it should be here. So if I select my triangle, say reset to suggested constraints, it will take the current constraints and it will reset to be, it's like updating the constraints. So now we change it the constraints, so my button will be here. Like it's, let's see what the value is, 189 points on the left, and if you select the top one, it says 102 points from the top. So this is our new coordinates. Another thing we have here is update constraints. So if I move my button somewhere else, and if I open this, it says update constraints, and it's going to be setting my constraints, update them as well. So let's look at the second button here. What I'm going to do is actually clean all my constraints. Let's do it for all the view. And let's position it here in the right corner. And then we select this square button here. So it says add new constraint. And we have our square here, which is represented our view. And then we have like some suggestions here. Currently, if we add top constraint, you can add it by clicking on this, and you see it becomes orange. It says that on top it will be 0 point. I can actually manually insert 10. And on the right side, if I click now, currently it's 16 points from the right panel. So if I add this, it's going to add another 16 from the right side. And same we have for bottom and on the left side. Then at the bottom here, you have another section. It says width and height. So when it comes to buttons, sometimes we can set the width to be something standard, constant, so it's not going to change. So our width can be like 81, and if I set this, it's going to keep the width to 81, and height is going to keep to 30, so we are adding constraint there. So right now I have added 4 constraints, and you can see that here on the button it says add 4 constraints, and if I click add, it's going to add 4 constraints, and if I zoom in, you will see that we have all blue guidelines. So right now my button is exactly positioned where I want to be, and if I run on any device, my button will always be on the right hand side, 10 points on spaced from top and 16 points spaced from the right side of the screen, and the width and height is going to be fixed to 81 as the width and height as 30. If you want to update it, you can do it here by clicking edit, and let's say I want to set it to 80. And you can see my button, some of the text of my button disappeared because the width is not wide enough to hold all my button. I can even say it 85 here, and you see that the size automatically is being updated as well. But for example, if I go select my button and I go and update the size only, so I set it like 100, it will be 100 now, but on runtime you can see our orange guidelines that it's going to be 15 points smaller, which is 85. So even though I see it around 100 now, when I run it's going to be 85 points. So this is our third version of adding constraints. The first one was dragging to the view we want to add and then choosing some of it. The second one was letting the Xcode to do it automatically, which is not a very good idea. And the third one is adding these constraints manually. The best solution is to do it manually, plus you can use the first solution depending on the position of your view. For example, here, when I want my label to be exactly in the middle of the screen, I cannot do it using this area here, because if I set it on the left to be 166 and on the right on 67, on a different screen size it's going to be completely different, and I cannot set it to be top 303 and bottom 323 because again other screens have different sizes. The best here would be to drag diagonally, set it to be centered horizontally, and if you hold shift you can select multiple constraints here. But if you don't hold the shift, when you select one, it's going to disappear. So I'm selecting the two, center horizontally and center vertically, hit enter, and you will see that now my button on the runtime is going to be right here, but we still have orange lines here, which means that my button doesn't know how wide it's going to be. So if I open my panel here, and I said that the width should be 42 and hit enter, means now I have all blue guidelines and my label is going to be exactly in the middle no matter what my screen size is or no matter what the orientation is. So let's do the same thing with the button 3. My button 2, sorry, it's going to be, let's set it 16 points on the left, 20 points at the bottom. I'm going to keep width and height standard. So we have 3 labels and all three have auto layout constraints. So what I'm going to do is, let's run it first on iPhone 8. Let's click stop because we have already running it. So on my main view, you can see that my buttons are positioned properly, and this was the case even before because we were working on iPhone 8 size here. But if I rotate my device here, and you can rotate it with command and arrow, left or right, you can see that my UI doesn't change. My button 2 is still at the bottom, my button 1 is there, and my label is exactly in the middle. And if I turn upside down, because my application doesn't support upside down, you can check it here under our application deployment target. You can see that device orientation upside down is not ticked. So if no matter how I turn my device, my layout doesn't change. And let's stop it and let's run on iPhone 10 and see how it looks there. So you can see it positioned nicely on our corners, and if I turn it, it also looks very nice. Let's turn it another way around. It also looks perfectly fine. So our views are here as they are. Because we are using auto layout, our application is consistent throughout the devices and throughout our orientation of the device.